We cannot make something from nothing, as it did in raising the number one into being. We cannot do it. It did. And yet, other than that one limitation, we are purposely made to be the equal of the Maker, and we are as infinite as the Maker, sharing its attributes of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. Omnipotence defined as anything but what it did with that first equation, something from nothing. Okay, the fifth question is another fascinating one. We know from Genesis that in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. We know how it was done, by the means of sound. We know what it is that we are, created to be its equal. Question 5 is, why did it do any of all of that in the first place? Why was it? No, because remember, it is literally no thing. And boredom is a human attribute. At the level of the mind or less, and it is what is so far beyond. Boredom is not a possibility.
That was its purpose.
Huh?
That was its purpose.
What was?
To create.
It doesn't have a purpose. It simply is. Eckankar has that as one of its fundamental premises. It just is.
But if you have adding consciousness, that is part of consciousness.
Here is the answer I came up with for question number 5. Why was it done? Remember, we're talking about the infinite being, and all of its qualities that can be implied are infinite. Infinite knowingness, infinite presence, infinite lovingness. You know, along with the New Testament in Jesus came the love concept of the Creator. Eckankar says, soul exists because God loves it. That's the why as stated in Eckankar. But I go farther than that. If all of these qualities are infinite, and especially that quality of love, do you know anything about energy flows? You got electric lighting here. You have to have a source of that energy for it to flow out through the lines to reach a filament to light up the light. Energy flows.
Why the pyramids are all in a line, they look at the ley lines.
Love is an infinite energy. It is like the being itself, infinite. And therefore love is a flow before the beginning.
And I would call that flow consciousness.
It can be called that, but here's the point. For any flow, you have to have a starting point, like a generating station, and an end-use point, like the lights. Before the beginning, when there was simply be no thing and nothing else, you had one point. You can't have a flow with one point. You have to have at least 2 points for a flow. Now, some people would then say, well, God had to, like she said, that's his purpose. God had to make everything because he had to. Again, I say, no, that's a human concept. The Creator didn't have to do anything. But here's the thing. Even before doing it, it was capable of conceiving it and knowing. You know, it says in Genesis, God did this, God did that, so it was good. The no thing, even before creation, could see that the result of its acts would be infinite endpoints for infinite flows of love from it to them connecting, and then for them to do the same thing, expressing themselves to the utmost like unto it, and making endpoints of their own for infinite flows of love to them. In other words, infinite flows of love in every direction. Before it did it, it could see that that would be the result, And even before doing it, it saw that it would be take on Genesis, and therefore it didn't do it because it had to. That's its purpose, like you just saw. It did it simply because it could. And taking that option was a good thing. So it did it. Because it could. Knowing what the result would be. Infinite lovingness. That's the why. All qualities, infinite, the artist, the poet, the lover, all those things infinite in the maker. So when it verged on doing the creation, all those aspects came into play, and it did it because it could. Because only then are those attributes expressed. The artist, the lover, everything else. Not because it had to, simply because it could. And that goes back to the Eckhart principle that says we exist because God loves us.
It's also because of the duality in expression to create the expansion of consciousness, but then we get back into it.
But it did not have to. It already was complete before it did it. The point is...
But when we expand its experience, it is expanded by infinite creation.
Yes, yes. Or some would say that's how it knows itself.
When it chose to.
In Eckankar, it said, we exist because God loves us. Well, yes, that's true. Because it saw that it could do it, and that it would be good, so it chose to do it. And that's why we exist, because it loves us. Because that's what it chose to do. The act of loving. For creation, for infinite art, for... Question number 6 was the one I went into earlier that somebody had a problem with when they started leaving. And I talked about the Satnam and the unmanifested souls and their individual names. That was question 6. All of them are leading up to question number 7, part 1 of the book. The first 7 basic real questions, the reason the book exists at all. Questions of them is been asked all through human history, but never answered the way I do. What is the meaning of life? Because my book, as I was shown to construct it, as I was told to write it, is like a geometry text. Each successive question uses what came before, like later theorems are proven using earlier theorems. And when you get to number 7, what is the meaning of life? It can only be explained if you have the first 6 questions and their answers. Like what was came before, the nature of the maker, how it was done, what a soul is, and how the unmanifested soul becomes the manifested soul. And the journey of life, that's what it all revolves around. So when you explain the meaning of life, all of those concepts have to be touched on to explain the meaning of life. Yes, yes, but what I was trying to do was answer these questions fully. They're only real questions if they bring you concepts addressing those questions that were never present previously. And that's what each of those 7 questions does.
I think most the mystery schools say that it's not the answer, it's the question how you learn that allows that expansion of consciousness.
Okay. Well, I guess then for me as an individual, that's what this book was doing. It's the reason, I say born to raise consciousness. I was literally born to write this book. I can trace through my family history, showing that there are less than 6 chances out of 440 for this body to even have been constructed as it was. Starts with my grandfathers. Mother's father, father's father. They were brothers. You know what that means? Mom's dad, mom and siblings. Dad's dad, dad and siblings, brothers. That means mom and dad, first cousins. I did research while writing this book. I touched on the National Council on Genetics, American National Council on Genetics. In their writings, they state that first cousin parentage worldwide happens only 1 time out of 5. So that's the first set of odds I was dealing with right there. 1 out of 5. Along this line, where mom and dad were, 6 on mother's side, 5 on dad's side, there were 11 of them. The liberation in 1945, end of World War II, only 1 still alive, my 2. At that point, you've got 2 and 11. Then, my mother was actually pregnant 4 times. My older brother, myself, a girl who didn't make it, and my younger sister. So it was 3 out of 4. But remember I said American English was so important to answering the first question? If you know anything about neurolinguistics, the way the neurons in the brain form is linked to the language around the developing fetus. In the case of my older brother, by 4 years, he was still back there in Germany with my parents before he came across the ocean. The odds for an American brain like mine to deal with that first question, as opposed to my brother in Germany, 1 out of 2. And if you take these 4 sets of odds and take their product, you come up with 6 out of 440. And there are factors I can't even put into numbers, like the number of times I should have been killed in the gymnastics champ, my getting lost while my parents were getting citizenship, the 500 people out looking for me all day long. My nearly taking out my wife and I on a highway in Milwaukee, 60 miles an hour on rainy pavement, and coming around the curve, only to find at the end of the curve a guy stopped dead in my lane. And I couldn't hit the brakes, we were on the wet pavement, and I couldn't turn the wheel too drastically because I would put the car into a spin. I simply very quickly jerked one way and then back again to steadiness. We missed his rear bumper by about this much at 60 miles an hour and went on down the road. And I know good. I was a gymnast and a very good paintball player with quick reactions. And I said to the wife, I felt other hands on the wheel with me. Yes. But in going back through my parents' stories in Nazi Germany and the concentration camps, same thing with them, over and over and over in their stories. Go one way, you're dead. Go the other way, you live. And their testimony that in some cases they knew they were being pushed. So it started all the way back with my book. The mission statement in the Invisible Worlds for this book I wrote probably preceded the birth of my grandfathers. It was already said, we will have this book written on Earth. And then, around 1900, my grandfathers got the tap. And then around 1920, they fathered my parents. And then it came to me in America. And so the book was intended all the way back prior to 1900. And I got the job. And all of this became plain while I was